is that there's lack of awareness of anything beyond the world of itself. And I think that's a big limitation. I would also say that the amount of value added you can get from, let's call it, small inventions and innovations is limited. So we need to have economic game changers. And I don't think economic game changers will necessarily come from the small-time entrepreneur starting trying to create products or coming up with a new idea. That's good and needs to be encouraged. But really, economic game changers will come from big thinking, and big thinking needs to have needs to be the result of putting minds in industry together with minds in academia, together with minds in government, and actually getting them working effectively in a coordinated way.
Conscious. I would say.
Can I make a point here? A quick point. Probably more 10, 15, 20 years ago, there was this comment that Trinidad is not an entrepreneurial nation and so on. And there were a lot of similar issues to what is happening right now with regards to innovation to try and create an entrepreneurial culture. And I dare say I will classify Trinidad really as an entrepreneurial nation at this point in time, not necessarily entrepreneurial, innovative culture. But if you, I don't know how many people in the audience know Barracoa or St. Helena's. If you drive through these communities, it is amazing how entrepreneurship is thriving. Literally every second house in Barracoa is a business that is servicing the community and so on. That is actually sprung from within the communities themselves, entrepreneurial needs and so on. We've actually achieved a lot in this sense. We now have to actually apply a lot of similar thinkings and a lot of similar pressures and so on to really create out of that entrepreneurship culture that we now have created an innovative environment. Get these same people to really get out of the comfort zone into really, not so much the mom and pop shops and selling of the roti and the doubles and opening a medical health center within the community and so on, but to innovate and to actually come up with some brand new things that is actually going to really drive our economy forward.
Thank you.
Big issue with your applause. Are we in innovation? Let me challenge you on this. Point to me some innovations in your country. Can you point to them? I'll start off the list. We have one of the most innovative transportation systems in the world.
Agreed.
You might not like maxi taxis, and innovation is not about your convenience. The reality of our transportation system is we move hundreds of thousands of people every day in relative comfort, in relative safety, at relatively low costs. And it is owned by over 30,000 entrepreneurs, many of whom own their own taxis. If you say to me that it is about the new, the different, and it must have economic impact, change that. All-inclusive feds. Hundreds of millions of dollars were raised this year in well over 100 all-inclusive feds. That came out of a thinking from all-inclusive hotels. If you draw a connection between the Queen Mary that sailed the high seas in the 1950s and the wee trucks that we see today, the connections are that large luxury liners with transportation across the Atlantic, predominantly. Then people got the idea of, why does it have to be the destination? Why couldn't it be the journey? And so cruise ships just went and sailed around. The hotel industry responded to it, and our world-class hotels, and these are world-class hotels, in Bahamas, in Jamaica in particular, converted that to all-inclusive hotels. We converted that to all-inclusive feds. And the latest manifestation are all-inclusive bands. Talk to me about the money raised by Bliss and Tribe and you name the band. And Carnival has innovated. The bands basically said, you see downtown, you see Savannah, we want it. We're choosing a different venue. And that is going to change. So if you want to talk innovation, look to the economic impact. Look to the indicator rather than your own feeling. Because if you use your feelings as an indicator, as we have learned in the CCI, and that's one of the problems with the World Competitiveness survey, 80% of the weighting of the responses are perception. So if you happen to have indigestion that morning, tough. Look to the real indicators. The real indicators are, do you see economic activity? Do you see new startups? Do you see copycatting? Because one of the first indicators of a society starting to innovate is you start a copy. And in the copying, you learn to adapt, you learn to modify, and ultimately you learn to create something new. So it's not to cry it down. It's just to look at the reality around us and say, wow, we live in there. So, to challenge the audience, what are the innovations that you could point to, that you could touch, see, feel, and take pride in?
Yeah, if I could just pick up on that, Francis. I mean, I agree, and I've also always said that the bus route and the maxi taxi system is just a fantastic transportation. Coming as a non-Trinidadian into the, and people don't believe me when I say that. But I say, believe me, this is one of the best transportation systems you could get in the world.
Can it be better? Yes, eh? But don't deny what it is, how good it is.
It's the flexibility of it. It's the flexibility. It's not and low infrastructure costs, all sorts of things inside it. But the point I'll make is that those low-scale innovations give an indication of the fact that that you can have a kind of grassroots, bottom-up kind of problem-solving, innovative capacity in our society. But if we were to think about what metrics, apart from what we look in GCR, how do we actually measure innovation in an objective way? I was reading an article by a guy called Edward Jung, who was previously, I think, Microsoft chief architect. And he was citing some work that's saying that good measures of innovation would be which countries or which companies have more than one patent issued to their name, and which companies or countries are funded by a major venture capitalist. Just to say, these are ways you can measure how innovative a company is. And you could look at the US context. If we were to use those metrics in a Trinidad context, and say, let's look at issues of patent creation, let's look at issues of venture capital, funding of new ideas. And both of those areas were exceptionally weak. And those are major limitations to taking the entrepreneurial life. I actually think some of the innovations you mentioned are probably more entrepreneurial in nature. Taking those and ratcheting them up to substantial national economic impact.
I think you're wrong. If you look at the firm level for innovation, the metric you use is GP. The reality of business.
Is what, Francis? GDP?
No, GP.
Gross profit.
Gross profit,
Right.
your margin. The reality of business is that you spot a profit opportunity, you start a business, you go. You making a nice profit. Along comes competitors who feel that they could do it better, cheaper, and they undercut your margin. You have to innovate to maintain your margin. The number of patents are nice. That ain't going to happen across the majority of firms. The reality of it is focus on GP, and GP forces you to keep changing to stay ahead of the pack. And that's where innovation sleeps.
Okay.
I can actually respond to that. So I think that focus on GP is one of the reasons why we are not as innovative in Trinidad as we should be.
Now we have a debate.
Because I think GP and the perpetual focus on GP drives you to look at the way that you can make money in the greatest efficacy. It's like the easiest way to secure next year's profitability. But in order to secure long-term profitability, that's where you have to invest some of your
Okay.
Spoken like somebody whose salary is paid every month.
Sure.
If you have to make your payroll every month, whole different story.
Francis,
I
let me
see-
add to this. Let me add to this.
Panel is getting into a very
Let me add to
excited
this,
discussion here.
GP may be the focus, yes. But GP doesn't mean that you actually end up doing a lot of the same to actually increase the bottom line, which is where our mindset of a lot of organizations in Trinidad lie. We want to do more of the same because it's generated profits in the past. I mean, classic example, and my apologies to all bankers in the audience. The banking sector is consistently making more and more profits. Are they innovative? And the answer is no. Not by any stretch of the imagination are we innovative in the banking sector. But it is the focus on the bottom line and the way in which you get to the bottom line that has to drive the innovation.
Let me just say that I think that
the
both
sector is a bad example because
It's actually a good example.
because what they invest in currently and for the last 3 years has been significantly driven by their regulator, who has been driven by a set of external forces.
Sorry, e-commerce and e-payment system for the banking sector is not driven by a regulator.
So
Sorry.
we can have that as a debate. It's about thinking differently. We at the Arthur Lockjack Graduate Business School, Arthur put money in to help start this campus. Who here could describe what Arthur did that was so different that caused him to be rich?
His son.
I might be the worst
But here's the
person.
joke. I was there. I don't know that you were, but go ahead.
No, I would like you to.
Sometimes things are a seminal event. The TTMA used to, this is 20 years ago, a little bit more than 20 years ago. The TTMA used to host fortnightly meetings of members to discuss issues that the members were facing. And the typical issues that came up were problems at the port, congestion, repayment of VAT, the classic standard business issues, and what, as manufacturers, they could do about it. This particular meeting was at Scotiabank headquarters. We were in the cafeteria of Scotiabank on Richmond Street. Now, you have to imagine the situation. These were the days before he was Mr. Lockjack. He was still Arthur. He wore short sleeve shirts, not suits. Right? You may remember back.
He still does.
Not these days as much. Anyway, so people are talking, and he gets up and he's very irritated with everybody. And if I use language as a little inappropriate, I'm simply quoting. You see, I know the ass wrong with all you. All you keep seeing exporting as a problem. Exporting is not a problem. You keep seeing the Caribbean Sea as a barrier. The Caribbean Sea is a highway. It takes me a day to get a 10-ton truck from Port of Spain, well, El Socorro way at the factory, to Caracas. It takes me half a day to get a 20-foot container, which is about the same amount of goods, from here to Barbados. Okay, so I have to fill out some paperwork for customs. I can hire somebody to do that. It takes me 3 days to get from here to Jamaica. That shift of perception, there was silence in the room, that shift of perception of seeing something that everybody was seeing from a barrier to is a highway. Okay, you have some paperwork to fill out, and those were his words. Represented innovation in a very real way. It was a shift of thinking. And following, now he was not the first, but he was certainly in the leadership of the pack. And following that, a whole heap of people followed, which is why Trinidad and Tobago exports are where they are across the Caribbean Sea. That's the difference of the thinking. And yes, that's big picture. It's not small.
Okay, so if I could round this up a bit. Francis is pretty passionate that there's lots of innovation, which we agree. Chaotic, a little sporadic, somewhat disorganized. It needs a little more control, sustainability. I think they're both valid points. I think tend to be a bit disorganized and you know, chaotic, inconsistent, but that is somewhat the magic of Trinidad. Before I hand over to the audience, just one last question. We are very lucky to have very different experience here on the panel. Nicholas completely in well, not completely, but heavily in manufacturing. Francis from the Competitiveness Council, Graham from academic, and Mahindra from one question to all of you. If you had a magic wand, if you were in charge, you had a magic wand, and you had the ability to pull any, you know, send innovation through the roof in Trinidad, what would that be?
Okay, I'll jump in from an ICT perspective. The private sector as well as government create an environment where you can pay for services, pay for products and so on online. So the local banking sector to actually make the facility for e-payments for local entrepreneurs, for government to pass the amendment to the Audit and Exchequer Act so that you can pay for your government services online, you pay your VAT online, pay for your birth certificate, pay for whatever online. If that happens, there will be a flood of opportunities for SMEs in particular, but there will be a flood of opportunities in the country.
Yeah, Nicholas?
I agree, but I think that you said just one thing, right?
Oh, no, I mean.
Yeah. I think certainly innovation following on what Danny said, at the government level, if we could just reduce all bureaucracy. And I think that some of what we talked about today is as a result of us being only a market of 1.3 million people. Yeah. Margins are probably inflated along the way as a lack of competition. So I think that scale and competition will bring a lot more innovation. Yeah. I mean, to draw from, let's take my personal experience and personal thing from the chocolate business. We're the only chocolate manufacturer in the Caribbean. Now, sometimes people say, that's good, you have a monopoly, but no, we have to be competitive. But at the same time, I'm trying to create activity in this marketplace alone. You know, because I have businesses that are competitive. The snack business, we have holiday foods, we have sunshine, we have activity all the time, snacks are always top of mind. Yeah. Moo milk comes into the market, and I don't know if so much innovates, but just brings activity. You get responding activity. Now you start to see segmentation of milk. You get lactose-free, this milk, that milk, low-fat, full cream, almond, I mean, every possible thing. And that competition, I think, is the greatest motivator for innovation, is what I'm trying to say. And, you know, the snack business, it's very competitive, but as a result, it's very innovative. And I think without any empirical evidence, I'm pretty sure if you look at the most competitive industries, you'd find that the most innovative as well. So I think that, you know, on a scale, if we had mass amount of population, you may find much more segmentation. The segmentation only gets to a certain point before it stalls. I don't know if that's necessarily an answer to pull a wand out, but certainly that if we had more innovation throughout government services that were much more, efficient, yeah. You may find more people jumping into different businesses.
Yeah.
May I offer two?
Two.
The first needs a little bit of context. One of the frustrations we have at the CCI is understanding how much is spent in research, development, and innovation at the firm level. It is not because, and let me stress, it is not because firms are not spending. It is because they're not required to report it. Mm-hmm. So what ends up happening is people make a jump from that to Trinidad and Tobago firms do not invest in R&D. Context. The developed countries are able to say how much their firms invest, and that comes out of a history in the 1950s between the Cold War between the USSR and the US, where the US was falling behind. You know, Sputnik launched before, Gagarin launched before, and they were deathly afraid of losing the space race. The consequence of that was that they did two things that they benefit from to this day. One was they put tax incentives into supporting research and development. But if you're going to put a tax incentive, it means that you have to be able to track it. Now, all developed countries now do that. We do not. We're operating on tax codes that date way back to the 50s. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And because we don't know how much is being spent in R&D and innovation, as a country, we don't know if it's well-directed, we don't know where it's going, we don't know who is doing what. So one of the first things from a CCI point of view and from a policy point of view would be to put the incentives in, but to put in a requirement over 3 years to require firms to report on it. The rules, the accounting rules around what is an innovation, what is research and development are very clearly written. Having chatted with the partners at EY and PwC, they could do it tomorrow. It will take 3 years for transition. Your firm invests in innovation, but the investment gets lost in the GL. That needs to change. So that's the first thing, and that's a policy issue. The second is to keep the conversation going. 20 years ago, this conversation wasn't happening. The conversation is happening. And out of that conversation is an anxiety that you're going to get left behind. That anxiety drives innovation. Because the counter to not being innovative is to being comfortable. One of the things that, and let me stress this is a personal opinion, it is not a CCI opinion, is when you have an extraordinarily low rate of unemployment, why you should bother to change? If you're comfortable, if you have a job, it is the anxiety that comes, that progress can bring, and asking, why not me? Why I can't do that too? That drives innovation.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah, I think to build actually on what Francis was saying, I mean, Francis has given us a lot of good examples of how innovation is actually taking place. And I think one of our biggest hurdles is seeing ourselves correctly and gaining a confidence that, you know, we can do it. So if it's a very magic wand and I was able to wave it, I'd want to wave it over mentalities and get people to change their thinking, change their perception of the reality. And I think that would give us a very different platform from which to move forward as a nation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, panel. Now, do we have time for 2 questions from the audience?
Could we turn on some lights so we could see the audience better?
What do-
Okay, first question, what help is there for Trinidadians with innovation now to get projects off the ground, from idea to prototype to manufacturing physical products?
If I may I go to that? 2 years ago, we introduced the I2I program. You can get taxpayers' dollars for free. Let me say that again. Taxpayers' dollars for free. Grants between $20,000 up to $250,000 on the submission of an application. The way the process works is a very simple form. You fill it out. What is the innovation? It's evaluated by an evaluation panel. What we do before it goes to the evaluation panel is we strip out any identification of person. So it's simply, the application simply gets a number. And the chairman of the evaluation panel, which we created separate from the CCI, is the chairman of Kariri, and they're technical specialists. So they're evaluating the feasibility of the application. Statistics. We got last year 470, roughly, applications. The panel proposed 57 of those going forward, because a lot of the applications were not innovative. They were really to fund the business. We will disburse, if everything is disbursed, about 6.7 million. We are failing as a CCI. Somebody give you $10 million to disburse, and you could only disburse 6.7 million of it. So we're looking to double the number of applications and consequently the number of projects we could fund. We fund to the level of proof of concept. So you have something you could take to investors and say, look it, there's a market for it. Rather than have a nice idea, but I really ain't sure what it should look like. So that's a very positive, very real development. Where further work is needed is, okay, now you have proof of concept, how you funding the business? That one, we haven't solved yet.
So initially, there's a $10 million pot every year?
Every year, with a commitment that the pot could increase if we need more money. It's just we haven't needed it yet. So one of our desperate challenges at the CCI is to simply beat the bushes and say, hey, well, you know, this is taxpayers' dollars coming to you as a grant. Now, it's not all altruistic. If 5% of those start a business, the taxes they will pay and the employment they will generate over 20 years will more than pay for whatever investment we made as a country.
Okay, so does that answer the individual's question? CCI, either see Francis after this or Google CCI, but know that there is the ability to get access to up to $250,000 innovative project, not just starting a business. Wrong. Just people are writing their questions there?
People are
Okay.
writing and bringing them down. So the next question actually goes to Dr. King and or Mr. Lewis. And he paraphrases that Senator Tuari spoke about the ability to compete and to create an environment of innovation and to have a high risk level of collaboration. Can you advise me what is being done to create an environment whereby our energy service industry specifically can compete locally and globally with specific reference to the countries in the sub-Saharan region of the Guyanas?
Okay, I'm not sure I can answer the details of the question, but in terms of the need for collaboration that the minister was speaking of, I was very happy when he said that. And I heard him talk about the importance of this university industry collaboration. I think it's very important. I think that will help to engender a lot more firm level innovation. And I think firm level innovation is where you can get some big shifts. And I think the energy services sector is an area that we've probably overlooked in terms of its